Well, a couple months ago, I started digging this hole to remove some fill dirt to build up this road through here, since it was a low, muddy mess. But then, we were kind of lucky enough to hit a spring at the bottom of the hole. So this hole ended up flooding into a crystal clear pond, so that's pretty cool. But now, I decided to come back and really doctor it up, dig this pond deeper, now that we're committed to a pond, smooth out all the banks. But in all that mess, obviously we ended up in a situation like you see right here. So I figured it was time to turn on the cameras so I could get you guys to help me get this thing unstuck. So as I was parked here, dredging out the pond, definitely started sinking down in this low spot. And also, as you can see, the mud is nice and angled. So with a combination of angled mud and rocks being packed into my track, and this track being loose anyways because the tensioner is broken, we ended up really spitting this track off, and it's in a horrible spot to work on it. So we're just going to try to move this excavator to a nice dry flat. Oh, come on.
I was trying to lean on it.
I don't know what you're doing with my tripod. I was just trying to tell the people where we're trying to get this thing parked, such as this dry flat spot right here. Nice, Ron.
I am the tripod.
So I think the plan is we're going to try to just use the one good track paired with the boom to lift up this dead side and swing the boom and then reset, and we'll be able to creep this thing out of this hole, hopefully. I'm also going to get my 7-ton pulled in here to chain to the frame of this machine, and I think that should help it get it pointed and down the direction we're trying to get it. That's also going to mean that we're just going to abandon this track in the mud and come back for it later, because it's probably going to be easier to just completely put it back on in a nice spot to work on it rather than try to make it work in this mud hole right now. So now on this end of the pond, the banks are nice and smooth, and I got it really deep down there. Also, we drained the pond down before doing all this digging, just so it'd be less water to stir up. So the water level will still end up like 8 feet higher than where it is right now. Come down here. Down here at this deep end of the pond, there's this really cool rock slab I was able to uncover. That angled rock just runs this whole length of the side of this pond. And as you can see, we still have some nice crystal clear spring water that's flowing from underneath this rock. So that is feeding this pond to make it nice and crystal clear and spring fed. This is some real refreshing water coming out of here. This bank used to have a less steep of an incline, but this machine is sinking so much that it's really caving in this side. So hopefully the rest of this bank doesn't completely cleave off and take the machine down into this hole. So we'll see if we can pop it out here without too much issue. Man, excavators have got to be the most fun piece of equipment to operate, just given the sheer amount of creative freedom you can do and all the crazy, unique maneuvers you're able to do with them. I don't even know why excavators come with 2 tracks. This thing moved around with just 1 track just fine. Alright, now we have a pretty good workspace here. Nice and dry. Lots of space in front of this track. Have it lifted off the ground. Old Ron's getting the skid steer over there. We'll use the skid steer and hook some chains up and fish the track out of the mud there and bring it over here and use the skid steer to help place it back on here. Well, let's reposition that chain. That's a real dead weight. We might have to commit back to just rolling it. This track was only interested in moving if we roll it through the mud. Yeah, that's way easier on the skid steer. The old ghost track. Well, that's not really feeling like rolling anymore. Yeah, there it goes. Dang, this thing is really hard to move. Just dragging the dead weight of it. With all the traction, it still catches. Whoa! We popped this chain off. Well, we had this track repaired with this chain. But I just popped off, so this is about to blow. Yeah, me and Ron are both just misfits with our tracked vehicles, apparently. Obviously, my excavator with the broken track tensioner, and old Ron's skid steer. This is really splitting all the way across, only holding on by a thread. So we had it bandaged, bolting this chain through here, so we had chain strength throughout this, but that snapped the bolt. It's grade 8 bolt snapped. So we're gonna try to replace it again. I'll go ahead and just reach over here with the excavator boom and hook to the chain and drag this the rest of the way since we need more oomph. Go pull these top rollers off now, and that'll give us the space for the slack track to hopefully get back in position. And then we can tension them back up with adding these rollers back in place. So. From this point on, we don't really know what we're doing, so we're going to start grappling it with the skid steer and try to get it thrown on one end. But we might have to try a few different things. so close to being done. Let's get this one last idler in and this machine will be back in business. And by back in business, I mean this track will still be quite sloppy, but as long as we stay out of mud holes, this thing will move around just fine. Now I'll go reach back over and flatten out that mud hole we got stuck in. That way the rest of that road can dry all the way out, and then I can fix the rest of that pond. This work you're seeing here is tearing down about 3 acres of trees so we can turn this area into a pasture for my future animals. So that entails knocking down all the trees with the excavator, and then the skid steer with the grapple is able to collect all the loose pieces and pile them up so we can burn them in a big fire. And then the skid steer is able to go around with its root rake and scrape out all the root mat out of the top layer of soil so that layer can be nice and clean for the pasture. And once that mess of dirt and roots was piled up, I just dug big holes and buried all that mess because that's the easiest way to deal with it. And then spread out some nice topsoil on top to flatten everything out and make it all nice and uniform for the pasture. And then Ron was able to come in with the tractor and the box blade and run a bunch of laps through the area to really smooth everything out and turn it into a nice smooth little pristine plot of land to start growing some grass on. And now the pasture is finally ready to start seeding with grass. And thankfully I have the support of Sunday for this part, as they have sent me fertilizer and grass seed, as well as other lawn care products, and Sunday is the sponsor of today's video. Now Sunday Lawn Care focuses on safety for your family and pets, with no harsh chemicals and only carefully selected ingredients that you can trust. I'm spreading Sunday fertilizer now, which is full of simple, friendly, powerful ingredients backed by nature. Now I'm no expert on grass, and it's totally fine if you aren't either, because Sunday makes ordering what you need for your lawn so easy. All we have to do is answer some simple questions, such as the zip code we live in and the size and current condition of our lawn. And Sunday does the research of the climate and soil composition of our area to give us a perfect lawn care kit custom made to us and shipped free to our door. That's how Sunday was able to guide me to use a fertilizer with a nice nitrogen and potassium balance, and a grass seed mix that's focused on fescue with some support of perennial ryegrass as well. Now I'll get this grass seed dispersed. I even have a light on and off rain today that should help mix everything into the soil and hopefully get things sprouting soon. My neighbor has been trying to get some new grass to sprout around his house, but since they have some dogs, their new lawn has been taking a beating. So I'm going to help them out with some Sunday Pet Patch liquid fertilizer to bolster up these struggling areas. This liquid fertilizer can be hooked up to a garden hose, which will automatically mix the fertilizer into the water flow, or there's this electric sprayer wand available. So either way, the liquid fertilizer can be a more convenient option than the granular option. If you guys are ready to improve your lawn, then you can click on the link down in my description below and use code GOODRICH30 to get 30% off your first custom lawn plan. So click on that link if you'd like to learn more about how Sunday can help you, and thank you Sunday for sponsoring today's video. I was doing the last little bit of land clearing for this pasture and got one of those real unlucky sticks that just jammed up into this main feed hose for all my hydraulics. Like that crosses over to the main hydraulic tank over there, so all my hydraulic fluid came gushing out immediately and the whole machine was dead in its tracks. Luckily there's a few flex hoses for these hard lines. It seems to have been able to flex enough to where no damage really occurred. We just got to fix that hose end and get that reconnected. All right, we were able to repair that fitting over there and everything is back as it should be. So I'll get it filled up with hydraulic fluid again and then I'll be back to finishing this last little bit of land clearing. Now here's the corner going to the shop that way that I always get hung up with bringing my semi through here, because there's this tree and then this massive tree. It's not worth moving, so that stays put. So as I steer, hugging those trees to get around this corner, my trailer typically still rides up this hillside. And it'd be nice if we could just dig out this hillside and make it flat. However, this corner is just solid rock. It seems like all the way up this ridge line. But now that I have a giant excavator, we'll see if I can tickle at this rock a little bit. It might break up. It might not be solid rock. We might be able to crack it and move it out of the way and then get this corner flat on the inside. And that would help my trailering situation so much. So let's tickle it. Well, dang, this corner was digging out real nice until I got to this vein right here. That is a solid rock right there, coming down that ridge line. If that wasn't there, this would have turned out nice. But got dug out there, this side of the rock too. I'll try to just maybe scratch this with one tooth, see if it'll break up, but it seems very solid. It doesn't seem like it wants to break up. I mean, this machine already had some slop in the bucket pins, so what's a little more slop and wear and tear? So yeah, I basically beat on this rock, jackhammering it as hard as I could, all the way up to the point that the main tooth being abused ended up shattering into two pieces. Gosh, talk about some wear and tear on a machine. That tooth finally had enough of that. It's very hot. I can't even pick it up. Whew, it's real hot. Well, this tooth is now welded back up. I don't know if it's going to be strong. This tooth material was kind of weird, but the weld seems to have turned out pretty good. So we'll get this thing back on and see how it holds up. Now, the engine for my excavator used to have this really janky straight pipe exhaust from the previous owner. And it sounded terribly, and it was rattling itself to pieces anyways. So now I'm gonna do away with that. And I also think that any diesel that's naturally aspirated sounds terrible straight piped. So the best way to get them to sound good is adding a turbo to them. But I really don't care to actually have a turbo on this engine, just because I don't need the extra horsepower. Just because we're bottlenecked with the hydraulic flow and pressures that are already set in the pumps. So having more power coming out of the engine really wouldn't increase this capacity of this machine. It would just put more wear and tear on the components. But what I am going to put on it is this. It's half a turbo. It's just the hollowed out exhaust housing. And I did this once before with a 7.3 IDI engine, and it sounded really interesting. It makes a really unique howling noise. Now I have this big turbo housing that came off of a 14-liter engine. I split it apart from the rest of the compressor side of things and the bearing, guts, and everything. and just welded a plate there. So on the inside it's capped off, and then we have the normal exhaust outlet there. And I also welded this new flange down here that adapts the turbo to this 3-bolt design coming off this manifold. And I'm just doing this for fun because it should quiet down the engine a little bit and make the noise a little less annoying, and also add a really unique exhaust note. I don't really know what to expect yet, so let's get it on here and fire it up and see how it goes. But first, here's how it sounds just as it is right now. All right, this hollowed out turbo is installed, so now let's fire it up for the first time and learn together what sort of unique exhaust note comes out of just having the exhaust swirl through this housing. Well, it's still excruciatingly loud and doesn't quite howl as much as I was expecting. Maybe because it's such a big turbo housing compared to the little turbo housing that was on my 7.3 engine. So I don't know if it was worth it, but I still like it better than the jank straight pipe exhaust that was on before. Now, in my last 2 videos, I've been working on this truck, my OBS Ford F350. And in the last video, we nearly got this truck complete, but we ran into a roadblock with completing the manual transmission swap because the clutch pedal assembly I was hoping to swap into this truck wasn't going to work. This was out of a 1989 truck, and this is a 1994 truck, which those year models have what looks to be the same exact cab on the outside, but on the inside, they went ahead and changed some structure underneath the dash to where this was too big of an assembly and it wouldn't fit in there. To give you an idea of the space it is in there to work with, this was the brake pedal out of this truck, so much smaller bracket. So luckily the brake clutch pedal assembly that is supposed to go in this truck was readily available aftermarket, so I was able to just buy one. And I did get it swapped in. And the only difference with that is the structure was a little bit bigger to support a clutch pedal jutted off the side of it, but still much smaller than this. So now that that's in, we only have a few more things to check off the list before this truck is pretty much done. Next thing this truck needs is a master and slave cylinder for the clutch system. So I have a brand new everything right here. Let's get this installed. Now it's finally time to drill this hood stack hole. There we go. Turned out nice. Now I'm going to work on putting this gooseneck hitch on this truck, which normally they have these plates that bolt to the side, and that's how they attach to the frame. However, I'm going to be putting my helper airbags back on, and that whole bracket takes up this space on the side of the frame here. So I'm going to go ahead and chop this down and just weld it directly to the frame so it doesn't extend off to the side. And this hitch isn't actually designed for this truck. I got this used off of another random truck. So on these old Fords, there's not actually this big of a gap underneath the bed. So we got to sink this down. Which is going to entail cutting down on these lines. And I'm also going to notch the frame here and bend that tab down. And then this whole thing will end up seating down another 1.5 inches. So let me start cutting, and that'll make more sense to you guys. All right, I cut some slits in the frame right here. So now it's time to bend these down to match the angle of the hitch that's going to plop in here. So now this whole hitch is going to be cradled in like this. So now, as you can see, this is all notched down there, and then this angled section slots into the frame like that. So now this is ready to weld up fully. Okay, this thing is welded in here with some big old fat welds. Made sure this thing is really gonna hold onto the frame. But now I still wanna get a weld on that side in there. So I'm gonna swap to my low profile little flux core welder. It's a lot smaller than my argon welder, so this will fit in there and finish this off. All right, I did paint all these new gooseneck hitch components, so I'll assemble this back together. It's gonna take some encouragement. And then I also did get my helper airbags back in place. And as you can see, this whole blue bracket would have drastically interfered with the side plate for the gooseneck hitch, so that's why we couldn't mount it the more conventional way like it was designed. But it's welded solid and should be able to hold anything we hook up to. Now here's the bench seat for this truck, but for some reason these old Fords with the bench seat does not have a lot of leg room. Just in this model, this is the only Ford I've struggled with leg room with. So even with the seat slid all the way back, my knees are up against the dash. So I'm 6'4", so that would be uncomfortable. So I'm gonna work on modifying these seats. There's one rail that mounts to here with these 4 rivets. So I'm gonna grind those out and separate this and then move it down and then weld it back to that rail. And that should set everything back, however much I decide. Okay, these rails are welded back into the rest of the system, and this is offset 5.5 inches now, so that should keep my knees off the dash, and it should still transfer enough strength throughout the framework to not cause any issues. The last big piece to the puzzle of getting this truck back together is just putting the bed back on it, and then we'll be ready for a test drive. And it's been a long time coming to do this test drive. I was super excited to figure out how the suspension worked, and with all the mods we did front and rear and the coilovers we added to the front axle. Let's take this thing for a test drive. For some reason, the key won't crank the engine over, so I'll just jump it for now. Let's go! I'm pretty stoked with how this truck turned out. The coilovers up front soak up the bumps like a dream. This truck rides so much better than any other old Ford truck I've ever been in. So I think that coilover swap was a worthwhile endeavor. Also, the compound turbo mods that we added to this engine really helped to wake that thing up. And even though we're dealing with just 1980s technology there, this truck seems to scoot around pretty good. And for being a crew cab, long bed, lifted truck, it still boogies around. And this engine puts out enough power to make it a pretty sporty driving experience nevertheless. So this truck just has a couple loose ends left to tie up. Like there's a leaky fuel line that was dripping fuel on the exhaust. That's what made a little bit of smoke, if you happen to notice that when I was ripping around that corner. So soon this truck will be completely ready to take out on the open road, and I'm excited to do some towing with it and really get to enjoy it. So we'll go ahead and end this video here, and thank you for tuning in.